Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic? Let's do it. What was your "something is wrong, I can feel it" moment? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Ran into an old friend from high school at a local tavern. He was telling me how his life was good. He had a great job where all he did was walk around and drink coffee all day. And when he left, he hit the bars every night to socialize. Something was off. He didn't seem sincere, kind of had a fake attitude about the whole thing, but I couldn't place it. A month later, he ate a shotgun behind his parents' house. I didn't put the pieces together, but if you're drinking heavily every night with a fake smile, chances are you're not a happy person. My mom used to call me almost daily at work to ask me a question or just check in with me. It was almost annoying at times, but I always answered. One morning, completely at random, I woke up with a sense of dread I just couldn't shake. My mom called about 2 o'clock. When I saw her number on the caller ID, I immediately knew something was wrong. Mom had not told anyone in the family that her cancer had returned. She was calling to let me know that she had just found out it was bad. There was no reason for me to even suspect that was even a possibility, but for some reason I knew. I had a doctor's appointment early in the morning before school a few years ago, and getting into the car that morning, the air felt off. The smell, the temperature, the energy felt like something was bound to go wrong that day. On my way to school from the doctor's appointment, my phone and my mom's phone screamed this emergency alert to take shelter because of a tornado warning. But because we get them all the time, living in Tornado Alley of the South, we brushed it off, especially because we couldn't see anything. It wasn't 30 seconds, and the brush of trees to our left that we drove by revealed a massive, monstrous funnel heading toward my school, where my sisters also were. I called them, but service was down, and Mom and I are speeding through town to my aunt's house, and I look out the back window to see the tornado in the distance heading toward us. And at the top of the funnel are barn doors, house parts, and loads of other debris. I'm screaming, "Oh my God," and we're wide-eyed, feeling like we're going to die. Still trying to get a hold of my sisters, but they're not answering. And the news channel tells us the funnel is heading toward the school and hit the garbage company behind it. All in all, they were safe. Mom and I were safe. But at the end of the day, I knew something was off. When I woke up, I had just gotten my permit, still learning how to drive. Mom wanted me to drive back from the appointment, but for some reason I felt that she should. She didn't question it. That has to be one of the scariest days I experienced. I was a drug addict for 5 years. I bought some stuff from a new guy and wanted it in me ASAP, so I loaded a needle with half my regular dose, shot it up, and began overdosing. I already had my injectable Narcan with me and managed to get that shit all loaded up and into my thigh. 5 of the measured doses later, I managed to call for an ambulance and got my ass taken care of. It was some bad shit, fentanyl. Without the gut feeling, I would have shot a whole dose without my Narcan on hand and wouldn't even be in the position to call anyone. That shit doesn't cure overdose. It brings you back from the edge long enough to get treatment. It usually only lasts half an hour before you slip back into an overdose. I'm now clean and expecting my first baby. Not my story, but my fiance's. While at work, literally just cutting a pizza, her breath became shaky, and she described it as every emotion flushing in at once. Shivers down her spine and an overwhelming feeling of crying. Less than a few minutes later, her sister called in a panic state about their dad being in the hospital with COVID, and he would soon need to be intubated to try to keep him alive, with the current state of his lungs being damaged from years of smoking and being overweight. Keep in mind, we'd lost all contact with him that day before, and she knew something had gone wrong. Everything said in the phone call had been her first update. Currently, he's doing better. This was a few days ago, and his oxygen levels in his blood are fluctuating often. He's feeling a lot better. Teenage I, female, just finished hanging out with a friend about a mile from where I lived in the city. It had just gotten dark, and I was walking back home alone along with an unfamiliar route. Yeah, real smart. We had been in a very populated area, but now the streets were empty. A large man walks toward me. I get a bad feeling and cross the street so we don't pass each other directly. Nobody else around. A couple of minutes later, the palms of my hands and the whole back of my body start tingling. I'll never forget it. Looked back and the man had doubled back and was following me. Turned back around, trying to look casual. Kept walking. Tried to lengthen my stride without quickening my pace. As soon as I hit a corner, I turned right and ran as fast as I could. It was very steep, and I was absolutely terrified to realize that even under the threat of my life, I couldn't run nearly as fast or as long as I thought I could. Zigzagged home and made it. Didn't see him again. I will never ever forget that buzzing feeling. The body knows. Don't walk home alone in the dark like dumb young me. Woke up at 2:19 a.m. and was scared. Yes, it was 2:19 exactly according to my alarm clock. I never wake up at night. About an hour later the phone rang. It was the police saying my brother had been in a car accident and was in the hospital. He was riding with one of our friends after a party, and they rolled the vehicle multiple times. Both of them were ejected from the vehicle. Neither of them was hurt aside from scratches and bruises. Both of them were drunk and not wearing seatbelts. Police said those two things saved their life. Straight up miracle. I believe I woke up as they rolled the vehicle. My brother and I always seem to know when something is wrong with the other. For instance, my dog got hit by a car and had to be put down. He called me about 5 minutes after my dog was gone and asked me what was wrong. He had no way of knowing something was wrong. He lived 850 miles away. I don't believe in magic or any crazy telepathic stuff, but there are too many cases like this between us to deny that there is something going on. This past Christmas, I went over to my partner's aunt's house. We were all having a good time, but I felt something off in the pit of my stomach. About 2 hours into the night, her aunt comes around the corner, bent over with her mouth open. I thought she was trying to run outside to throw up after a night of drinking, but my girlfriend told me her face was turning blue. Turns out she was choking on a piece of food. One person tried to do the Heimlich maneuver, but couldn't get it. I stepped in and was finally able to get the food out. Funny thing is, we left like 30 minutes before that, but stopped back by real quick. We still don't know what made us come to the house again, but I'm sure glad we did. When I was about 16 or 17, I walked into a boutique that I always wanted to check out that was on a bad side of town. I just couldn't stand waiting to get someone to go with me. So I walk in, and the first thing I notice is the one employee who did not look like he belonged at all. He was really tough looking without the buffness, but he had tattoos from head to toe, and truthfully looked threatening. My dumbass makes conversation with him like he's my grandma, and he just replies quickly and shortly, then tells me to start shopping and to take my time. He was really rushy and quite rude, but I just brushed it off and started shopping. The second thing I noticed is that it's a pretty narrow shop. You had to squeeze in and out of aisles and clothing racks to get further into the store. Weird, but whatever. I thought I got about halfway down the main aisle, and I noticed that the employee was slowly following me. Every time I stopped, he stopped. If I turned around, he acted like he was putting stuff on racks, browsing, etc. I started getting pretty nervous when I noticed there was no other entry or exit, and there was a huge Rottweiler chained up in the back. I turned around to nervously make more conversation to delay whatever this guy was plotting, and I just picked up something and handed it to him and said, "Can you bring this to the register for me? I forgot my wallet and need to run out to my car really quick." I walked slowly out of the door and then darted for my car. I was shaking so badly driving back home. I don't know if I was just freaking out or what, but whenever I had a gut instinct, I at least knew enough to get the fuck out. I was in so many situations like this back then. I swear I've gotten by on luck, or maybe God is real. He is. I wouldn't dare do something like that now. Having a kid made me think a lot harder. Chances are the person was just the owner or employee of the store, and you were fine. But in a situation like that, or any situation, you did the right thing and trusted your gut. right or wrong, you didn't offend anyone too much, and you protected yourself. So next time, bring a buddy. I survived a crippling TBI. For about 5.5 months, I was not lucid. I had a vague sense of something was wrong, but I couldn't understand what was happening. I kept coming to awareness, then losing it again. It was like in a dream where you're sure something is really, really wrong, but you don't know what. And after a second or two, you forget you were worried. And then you realize something is terribly wrong. Like, I knew I should be freaking out, but I couldn't put it all together. Later on, I started getting temporal lobe seizures that lasted just a few seconds, every 20 seconds or so, but would reset everything. I would suddenly become aware, like waking but instantaneous, but it was hard to think. I would think, I'm sitting in a chair, but wouldn't wonder how I got there. Then I'd think, there are people around me. And then another seizure would hit, and it would all go away. This part was actually really pleasant. It felt like when you're napping on the couch on Thanksgiving after eating too much turkey, and there's activity all around you. You don't need to concern yourself with it. Lucidity came back for brief periods starting at about 5.5 months. The hallmark of lucidity was fear, and it was appropriate to be freaked out and scared. I had lost around 70 IQ points. I couldn't walk at a toddler level. My speech was a garbled mess. My vision was like looking at a blocked cable channel, and I moved like a marionette operated by a drunk. I had to be retold many times a day what had happened. Anterograde amnesia. One of the first moments that stands out to me was just shy of 6 months after the accident. I became aware sitting in a doctor's office. I thought, why am I here? I thought, hold up. It's one thing to wake in an ER and not realize how you got there. But this was an office with a desk and bookshelves. I wasn't scared yet, just puzzled. Then I noticed the doctor. She was leaning against the front of her desk. Her face was all scrunched up, like she was going to cry. She was looking at me like I should say something, like maybe she just asked a question. I noticed a woman sitting next to me holding my hand. She was actually crying. Turned out it was my wife. I thought, maybe something is really wrong with the crying lady, and maybe she just got some bad news. I looked out the window and it looked like spring. Like I realized I did not know the season, year, or even what city I was in, and I got really scared. It sank into me that something was horribly wrong, and that I could not, through effort, sort out where I was or why I was there. I tried to stand up, and the crying lady stopped me, but I noticed my movements were really jerky and flailing. Full king panic sets in, and I tried to ask what was going on, but only gibberish came out. My words were all mixed together and overlapping. I tried harder. I could form sentences in my head, but what came out was garbled. Broca's aphasia. They told me I received a brain injury months before, and that I should try gestures, since my ability to speak was damaged. I thought, oh my God, this is really happening, and to me. I guess I knew some ASL, and that part of my brain was undamaged. I signed asking if I was okay, and they both shook their heads. I'm a lot better now. On a good day, I'm pretty functional for a couple of hours at a time, and I can pass for a normie in public, at least until I move around or talk, and if I have a hat and sunglasses on to hide the eye patch. Overall, I feel lucky as hell. I was 16 or 17 and my family was heading out of town to visit relatives for Thanksgiving or Christmas. I was driving for the first leg. It was night, and the interstate through town was almost empty. I was in the right lane, had the cruise set right at the speed limit, and a semi was slowly passing on the left. A car came off an on-ramp that turns into a temporary lane that ends as an exit. The car didn't have room to merge on unless I slowed down, but I got this feeling to not let it pull in front of me. His turn signal comes on, requesting I give him room to merge. I bump up the cruise control 1 mile per hour to keep him from merging, right as he's being forced down the exit ramp. The back of his car lurches with a mechanical tearing noise and a shower of sparks, and I watch his right rear wheel land in the road and disappear down the ramp. If I'd let him merge in front of me, that wheel would have likely gone through the windshield. Not mine, but my grandma's. My grandpa was on the liver transplant list at the time. She was working, and she decided to go home for lunch. She never ever does that, but something was pulling her that way. When she got home, Grandpa was in a coma with his eyes rolled into the back of his head. He would have died then if she hadn't come home and called emergency services. My body has its something is not right moments. I can't really describe it, but I'll pause whatever I'm doing and then immediately hit the ground or try to get somewhere safe. Seconds later, I will black out and eventually recover. It's weird. It happened while riding my horse. She's extra tall, so I galloped her over to the porch, slid off of her, and then blacked out on the porch. When I woke up, she hadn't moved and stood over me with the dogs hovering and the goats as well. At work at the vet clinic, several times, just walking to a room in a house, in the bathroom, etc. When I was a kid around 3 years old, my granddad was pushing me on a little swing strung from the tree at the top of a hill in his backyard. We were almost inside because it was getting pretty cloudy and windy. I left a toy stuffed animal up there and was crying, so my mom consoled me while Granddad went back to get the toy. Apparently, and according to my mom, I said I wasn't crying because of the toy, but that Granddad would get hurt. She says that before she could say, "Oh, hell, be fine," a lightning bolt struck the tree. He was only halfway up the hill, but he said he could feel the heat off of it. Come to think of it, maybe that contributed to his hearing loss. I still insist that I was embarrassed about the toy, and I feel bad that Grandpa had to go into a scary, windy situation. My mother, still to this day, believes that I had some kind of special power, but I just lost it because I didn't believe. Whatever the case, I for sure called that one. A few years ago, I was dating this person, and they were not responding to any text messages I was sending. I usually assume if someone does not respond, they're busy. But for some odd reason, something felt off about it this time. Turns out, he was stuck up on a mountain with a girl he was cheating on me with. Did not suspect the cheating, but felt like something was wrong for sure. Note, not some weird person who thinks something is wrong when someone does not reply. It was just a weird feeling I had in that moment. I was at this music concert thing where kids would run around. I'm a teenager, and this was about 2 years ago, so I was younger and was running around too. And I couldn't find my little cousin, which usually wouldn't be a big deal since it's a big grassy place with kids constantly running around. But I had a feeling. I frantically started looking, and the next thing I did was look into the road, and there she was. I ran over and pulled her out of the road by her arm about a foot away from a car. Had a habit of walking around my neighborhood very late at night around 3 a.m. My road was backed up against a river and a solid few miles of woods, and it was usually pretty peaceful to walk around listening to music and generally never seeing another soul. One night, however, as I was walking, as I always do, headphones blaring, an overwhelming sense of dread washed over me. Something was following me. I'm not sure how I knew or how my body knew something was up, despite being unable to hear my surroundings, but I just knew 100%. I lifted my earphone just in time to hear a branch snap about 50 feet or so behind me and whipped around. Couldn't see very far, but I got the distinct feeling of being stared right back at as I looked into the darkness. My gut was screaming at me to get away. Every time I tried walking, whatever it was would start walking too. Then it would stop when it stopped. This continued for probably a full mile. Finally, I ended up walking backwards the entire way back to my house, never once dropping my guard and being unable to shake the feeling of being stalked the whole way home. In the morning, a few of my neighbors were outside talking, and I learned a mountain lion had been seen repeatedly in our area and how it seemed particularly bloodthirsty, as it had gone out of its way to kill several dogs and cats. Most of them were in the back section of the road where I had gotten that feeling. Creeped me right the f*** out. Took me a while to start taking night walks again, and even longer to stop pausing to listen every so often out of paranoia. Don't be oblivious like me. Always stay aware of your surroundings, because there is scary shit out there. Stay safe, everyone.